Hello, everyone. Welcome to the RICS World Built Environment Forum webinar series. Good morning, good afternoon. I hope all of you are having a wonderful day. The World Built Environment Forum presents the current, latest emerging topics in the broad areas of built environment. Today, we'll be focusing on the construction sector and more importantly, on a very important topic, which is very relevant and timely on the skills. So the title of today's webinar is Construction's Conundrum, Solving the Skills Shortage. Before we go further, I'm going to briefly introduce myself. My name is Anil Sahani. I am the Global Program Lead for the construction and infrastructure sector at RICS. I work with our members to find solutions for the various issues that our sector is facing. Today, that topic brings us to skills shortage in our sector. So let me now introduce our panel today. I'm really glad to have global experts speak on this very important topic. Our first panel member is Alistair Reisner, who's the Chief Executive of the Civil Engineering Contractors Association. Hi, Alistair.
Hi there, Anil.
Our next expert panel member is Lisa Malloy, who's an MRICS Commercial Director for Strabag, UK. Hi, Lisa.
Hi there.
Our third panel member today is Sarah Switzer, HR Specialist, Talent Management for Turner and Townsend. Welcome, folks. Really glad that you could join and share your experiences with us. To our audience, we have registrations from several countries, close to 30 countries, and we always welcome active involvement of our audience. Do please submit your questions to our panel, as it really helps bring the conversation to life. If you are new to these webinars, you should see that you can submit questions at any time, and we may integrate those questions into our discussion if the questions fit in the flow of what we are discussing. There is a question box in your screen that you can type your questions in. We'll pick up as many as we can towards the end of the session or in between. So let's move directly on to our discussion. So I'm going to start with a question that I'm going to pose to Lisa first. Lisa, just to set the context, let's begin by discussing how severe is the construction skills shortage and what's causing it. I've been working in the sector for about 25 years, and we've been discussing this issue, but there seems to be something different. It seems that the magnitude is amplified, and seriously, there are issues that are becoming a bottleneck for project delivery. So your views on how severe is the shortage?
Anil, I agree. I've been in the construction industry for 20 years, and 20 years ago it was muted then that we faced a skill shortage. Now it's at a magnitude that is far greater than we ever expected. I think the issue that we have here is that there's not just one reason why we face a skill shortage. It's a number of reasons that's given us that huge magnitude of a problem. You know, we've had an aged workforce, so we face a lot of engineers that I was surrounded by, and commercial people that I was surrounded by, and labour force that's obviously now gone into retirement, and there just seems to be a big gap there that we haven't quite bridged. We've then got an issue with trying to attract people into the industry. That's a huge problem that we face. We've also got an issue with, there's a number of projects going on at the moment, so the opportunity against the skill set that we have, so the supply against demand, the demand far outweighs the supply at the moment. We then have an issue with, you know, we've just had a Brexit, and people have left the UK, so we see that impacting upon us. So it's really, really severe. To give it some sort of numbers, the first 3 months leading up to March of this year, there was 48,000 vacancies in the construction industry. That's what the Office of National Statistics is telling us. So it's a huge issue that we face. And the shortage is also across the board. It's not one given area which is problematic. You know, I speak to people out in the industry, and it's QSs to engineers to estimators to planners to skilled people in the labour force. So it's right across the board that we face this shortage.
Thank you. I think that's really set the stage very well. Before I go to the next question, maybe we could expand this. I'd like to explore the dimension. Is it a UK problem in your view, or is it a global issue? And Sarah, I know you look after the Americas. Maybe you can share your views on how severe is the shortage. And Alistair, how do you see that? I know you're more perhaps UK focused, but how do you see it across, let's say, horizontal and vertical projects or building projects and civil engineering projects? Are they interconnected in terms of the shortage? So Sarah, your views on the severity of the issues. Are we facing similar challenges in Americas?
Yes, absolutely. So at Turner & Townsend, our bread and butter is cost management or quantity surveying, project controls, and project management. For us, it's more that it's not that we can't find the staff, they're out there. It's more that we have to be very competitive in the market when it comes to the salaries that these candidates are requesting. You know, also regarding cost management, we rely heavily on local expats, as quantity surveying is not a field of study here in the US. So we're relying on a already small talent pool to fill some of these opportunities. And then if we decide to go and hire internationally, we come across visa implications and a timeline perspective. So the shortage is very, very real here in the US when it comes to cost managers and quantity surveyors.
Thanks, Sarah. Alistair, what's your view in terms of subsectors within our construction?
Well, Eddie, I think when we look across the piece, we just need to remember that construction, both in the UK and globally, is a big beast. It sucks in huge numbers of people because it is such a large industry, and that means there is a large recruitment requirement. And some of the challenges that we face in the UK, that Lisa's touched on, the demographic challenges, I don't think they're unique to us. I think they're seen across other sectors. Certainly within the UK, when we look across our sectors, I speak with people in all parts of the UK construction industry on a near weekly basis. I don't know anyone who's not reporting that a lack of skills availability is a challenge. It's a really, really big problem for industry at the moment. And I anticipate that's probably the case wherever you are around the world.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Anything else you want to add to our first question on the severity of the problem?
The only thing that I would add in is that it's actually that we're predicting that it's going to get worse. We're not predicting that we're going to come out of this anytime soon.
Sure. So I think this challenge is going to remain, and we need to find probably holistic solutions to these challenges, skills, competencies, talent, because I think construction is a people business. So internally, our own employees, externally, all our stakeholders, the end users, it's all about people. We may go into industrialized construction and other formats of construction, but still largely people will remain central. So this issue is very crucial. It's very encouraging to see we already have several questions that have come in. I'm going to pick out of order, but I will definitely make sure I address all the questions, at least the ones that we can in the time given. So the question that I'm going to jump to is perhaps related to, it's from Graham. It talks about immigration opportunities. Are governments offering resident visas to encourage skilled professionals to move to their countries? Sarah, you probably see this more often than any one of us, because I know several colleagues in Turner & Townsend, and they are basically from the UK or South Africa or other parts of the world working in the US. Is immigration a challenge given the current geopolitical environment?
You know, if you would have asked me this question mid 2020, it would have been a huge issue with borders being shut down, embassies being closed, so not being able to accommodate anyone who had interest in relocating to the US. Now that that has opened up for the past year, we're able to accommodate those requests. The biggest issue is whenever everyone was closed down for that good year and a half, the backlog of embassy appointments, we're still seeing the effect of that. So, you know, even as of now, let's say someone is interested in coming over, we can't even get them an embassy appointment till the end of the year. So it's going to be a long run to get that backlog, embassy, get their visas and get them over to start working.
Thank you. And I think there are programs, I know in Canada, I know in the Middle East, sometimes at the program and project level, there are discussions with governments on offering visas to both skilled workers and our core professionals as well. So I'm going to now move to our second question. And Alistair, I'd like you to begin the answering this question. And obviously, Lisa and Sarah, you can join in. The question is, what impact is the skills shortage having on infrastructure delivery and other important programs such as affordable housing programs?
Well, I think, Anil, the short answer to that is it's obviously having a severe effect. It's severe because, as we've discussed, construction is a fairly labour-intensive business. It's also severe because it's coming at a time when there's other severe stresses on our industry wherever we are globally. You know, we're seeing sort of supply chain stresses through inflation, and obviously still the after effects of COVID in many parts of the world as well. Now, this typically drives wages higher, and so for the employees that could be a good thing, better pay packet, and that would hopefully mitigate the issue. However, I think what we're seeing at the moment is in most markets there are general shortages of labour across economies, and a lot of the skills that we're particularly looking for aren't those at low levels that you can almost just pull in from other parts of the economy. They're highly skilled roles that you need to train for. So I think that's creating a pinch point where there's just not enough people to go around. So if you do have infrastructure programs in the planning, if you are delivering significant affordable housing programs or other social infrastructure, for once, skills could be a red flag issue that might have an impact on your project. However, the counterpoint to that is I've worked in the industry for 20 years. I don't think I've ever come across a project that specifically didn't go ahead because they couldn't get enough people. I've seen plenty of projects not be able to go ahead, but people is rarely the reason that the schemes don't go ahead, because construction tends to find a way. You know, as an industry, we're problem solvers, and so there's bad bits to that. Finding a way could be de-scoping the project, it could be delaying the project. Horribly, it could be cutting corners in the way that the project's delivered, but also more positively, it could be about just doing things differently. So off-site manufacture, digitalization, use of things, you know, technologies like drones that perhaps do a job that would otherwise have taken a number of people. I also think that as an industry, we're getting very slightly better at recruiting more widely. Historically, particularly in the UK, there was a very specific demographic about the people that worked in our sector. So hopefully if we're expanding that pool, that hopefully means that we will be able to deliver these projects. I do think, however, that this skills shortage might have an impact on some of the what I might call discretionary price sensitive projects, particularly those that are paid for by consumers. So some aspects of housing, some aspects of commercial work. I think the impact on wage costs might mean that projects in those areas are unaffordable. For most parts of the world, I suspect things like infrastructure aren't nice to haves anymore. They're essential. So those will probably still go ahead, and they may benefit as the work in other parts of the industry declines because of this affordability challenge. I think the one unknown in this is we all know that carbon is something that we need to address, and that is I think a very labour intensive requirement. It's a lot of fitting new equipment, putting in new sort of glazing and things like that, which tends to involve a lot of people, and it's not entirely clear to me, both in the UK and globally, where those people are going to come from, and yet we all know it's an absolute essential that we address climate change. So I think in terms of the impacts on delivery, those are probably the key points I would want to make, Neil.
Excellent. I think you opened up so many dimensions that we could possibly discuss. One, I call digital a friend of construction, especially post-COVID. I think we've all taken a different view now in the sector of adopting digital tools, digital technologies, and other emerging trends, as you pointed out, industrialized or prefab and offsite construction, the dimension of net zero targets and retrofitting, I think, is an important one that further puts pressure on the skills shortage. And I think parallelly, there are so many other things going on: supply chain issues, material shortages, price escalations that combined, I think it's having a pretty significant impact. Lisa, are you seeing any benefits of utilizing digital tools to offset some of the pressures one would face on projects and programs due to skill shortages?
Yeah, I think we see the benefit, and they are getting rolled out across projects. But again, it's a new skill area as well. So we've got to try and get the people in and attract the people in and retain them. So it's a very new area for us as well that we're adapting to, I think.
Excellent. Sarah, from your point of view, looking at the new infrastructure bill or act with so much money, hopefully down the road flowing into shovel-worthy and shovel-ready projects, is that going to put more pressure? Do you think the sector is ready to deliver on that huge Biden's infrastructure act or bill?
Yeah, so that's a $1 trillion plan that will benefit multiple sectors and multiple industries, and it's going to create millions of jobs, which is great. But as Lisa mentioned earlier, that the older workforce is aging out, and there's not enough young people to replace them. I saw a statistic that only 10% of infrastructure workers are under the age of 25. So there's definitely going to be that gap we have to fill, and that shortage is going to make an impact, especially on the skilled trade side, being able to staff upwards of 100 people on projects whenever they're going to be very hard to find.
Excellent, thank you. Lisa, before we move on to the next question, does it present surveyors, chartered quantity surveyors, cost managers in other parts of the world, project managers, an opportunity to present various other planning tools and skills such as supply chain management, upfront planning, bringing things in a much more systematic fashion to address not only just labor shortage, but also perhaps material shortage that go sort of hand in hand? So is it ripe as an opportunity to tell clients, project sponsors, that there are other things that can be done? And I think Alastair briefly pointed those out. Do you see this also as an opportunity?
It is an opportunity for us to sit down, but as an industry, it's also noted that it's an area that we don't do enough of, is planning, and that often infrastructure projects cost more because we go on a site without the design being 100% complete and without enough plan phase. So we've got to get better at that as well. We've got to give projects enough breathing time up front to look at them, to plan them sufficiently. And with the skill shortage on our hands, I think that further compounds the problem.
Okay. Thank you. So let's move to the next question. And this one, Sarah, help us get started with this. How are skill shortages affecting construction companies?
Absolutely. I think from a recruitment perspective, we have to get really creative when it comes to the shortages and learn how to implement skill adjacencies. And what I mean by that is being less picky on the experience type that we're looking for, and start to broaden who or what background could work in these particular roles. For instance, here in Houston, the oil and gas industry took a big hit at the start of the pandemic, and the market was flooded with candidates with an oil and gas background. you know, their project type differs from true construction, but they still have that, you know, that skill set that can be transferable. So for us, it's more about taking the investment in the training and having them make that switch over to the construction industry. But of course, being mindful that they may make the jump back to oil and gas once that industry picks back up again. We've also had to focus quite a bit on our internal recruitment efforts and find out how we can shift people internally to best fill those gaps instead of hiring externally. And then as far as a chasing projects perspective, we haven't had to stop chasing projects or taking on new projects, just more about focusing, being more strategic on what we go after and utilize who we currently employ than having to go to the external market to try to find, you know, external employees to fill those needs.
Yeah, excellent. So I'm fortunate in my role to be able to speak to experts at the global level. I spoke to somebody who mentioned that they are walking away from projects because of capacity issues. You know, they are picking and choosing projects. So, Alistair, are you seeing that happen in the UK? The construction companies are unable to take on new additional construction projects, and also perhaps having to delay projects?
I don't think we're necessarily seeing that. What I think we're seeing is companies being selective around the projects that they do go for. So that will typically mean that they'll work for customers that they have long-standing relationships with, customers that they have good relationships with. You know, businesses know the capacity that they have to deliver, so they tend to right-size themselves toward that capacity and bid for the amount of work that they think they can deliver within that. I don't think people are knocking away work at the moment, specifically around skills, to a great extent. It's more the big picture of, you know, what realistically can we deliver, and matching their pipeline of opportunities to meet that. So I think probably strategically at an industry level, that is providing some capacity challenges, but I don't think most members would see themselves as turning away work purely on the basis of we don't have enough people.
Okay. Lisa, what kind of pressures are you experiencing or seeing in the industry when it comes to new projects?
Well, the pressure with the new project is finding the team. You link it to the skill shortage of finding the team that is then going to deliver that project. I do agree with Sarah. Sarah brings up a really interesting point around skills transfer set. That's something that I've always advocated in the construction industry that we should try and do. I have experience of it just because I'm a construction worker from a civils background who's jumped onto oil and gas and then jumped back to civils again. So that's certainly a big area that we should look at, because that's one of the biggest things that we face with delivery and projects coming off the ground is, like Alistair says, people are getting particularly particular about who they're going to work for, and that's based around what they can deliver, what their delivery set is. If we had more people, we could deliver more. So that's the biggest issue, is getting any project off the ground and having the right people in the right positions. You're finding now sometimes, because of the skill shortage, people are actually doing a job and working at a level that they might not be comfortable with working at.
Excellent, thank you. So let's move to our next question, which Lisa, I'd request you to help get started. The question is, how do we encourage more young people to consider construction as a career?
In terms of young people, when I've gone out and spoken to young people and parents and teachers, because really they're the people, the parents and the teachers, the people who drive their children or help their children to decide what type of career they're going to have. The biggest issue that I've got is they just don't understand us as an industry. They don't understand what we do. They don't understand the opportunity. They don't understand the particular roles that's available. So I get a lot of people that will say, oh, you know, I'd like my child to be an engineer. And I'll say, really, what type of engineer? A mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, a civil engineer, a design engineer, a structural engineer. And at that point, they just go blank, because they just don't understand the roles that we have available So they kind of direct their child into a particular role. They don't understand how to get them in there. They don't understand the routes into the industry. They don't understand that there's a lot of opportunity for that. Also, I think we've got a massive image problem. So for a lot of young children, in particular young girls, I would say, they just don't want to come into the industry. They think that, you know, it's a dirty industry, it's dangerous. Previously, over the years, we've had a boom and bust mentality that we kind of follow that route, you know, that in boom times everything's great, and in bust times, well, you know, you're going to be out of a job. So the biggest thing is it's about educating the young people and making them see that, you know, it's an amazing industry, the construction industry. You know, every day is different. It's your opportunity to change the world, especially with all this issue that we have at the moment with carbon reduction. You know, if anybody's got an interest in that, you know, you can really make a difference in the construction industry with how we build our future. But it's getting that word out to them and getting them to understand us as an industry, understand what we do, understand the opportunity, and that opportunity is worldwide. And encouraging them in, we definitely have an image problem, in my opinion.
Thanks, Lisa. Sarah, over to you. In your role at the forefront of talent management, how can we as a sector make construction appeal to a wider audience?
Yeah, so I think all of that is by engaging early on. We partner with a nonprofit after-school program called ACE, and they are designed to attract high school students to pursue a degree in architecture, construction, or engineering, including skilled trades. So getting from them early, and then we would offer an internship for these ACE members to get exposure to the business. Ideally, after that, they would go get that right degree to become that young professional. Regarding those young professionals, we have a graduate development program, which is a 2-year rotation program that provides experiences within a variety of disciplines and sectors. And, you know, we are committed as a business to groom them into professionals in the industry, especially within project management, cost management, project controls, and data and technology.
Excellent. Thank you. Alistair, there is a question from our participants. Oliver has a question, 2-part. I'm going to pick up the second part first and connect it to a sub-question that we had related to our current question. What more can governments do? And if I know there is a lot of experience in the UK on Trailblazers or the apprenticeship program. Could you share some of the ideas relating to how can governments help and what role does apprenticeship play?
So certainly for our members, apprenticeships is the #1 route for bringing people into the industry. And so what we've got to do is make these apprenticeships attractive. I think one of the other questions that's in the chat talks about, you know, what can we do to make ourselves more attractive, and says, you know, apart from the money. But that's one big thing that we shouldn't be afraid of talking about. We should say that this is a well-paid industry and you can have a good career for doing outstanding things. As an industry, we need to be blunt, a little bit more confident about what we do. Too often we do talk about, oh, you know, it's okay, it's a muddy industry, it's a dirty industry, it's cold. It's not. It's none of those things. You know, I've sat in rooms where people have told me that, and I've said to them, which of you actually got muddy last week? And none of them did, because loads of people in our industry operate in roles that, you know, never see the site and have a fantastic life doing what they do. Similarly, there are people who are working on site who have a brilliant life, and yet we kind of talk down our industry far too regularly. If we want people to join us, we should show what an exciting and brilliant industry it is to work in. But going back to the specific point around apprenticeships, it really is, to me, about selling the idea that instead of paying your own way through a university course and ending up with a lot of debt, you can earn while you learn and have a high quality training that actually puts you far ahead of those university graduates relatively early on in your career. And to do that, it means that employers must value those apprenticeships and treat them as if they were the graduates that they may previously have had. That's not to say there's anything wrong with getting a graduate degree. I say someone has had one myself. But I think, yeah, ultimately, what we're looking for is people who are ready to work. And apprenticeships are a fantastic way of doing that. So if I'm asking what the government can do, it's just continue, and this is governments rather than just solely the UK government, it's about making sure that they do support that apprenticeship route as a viable and sensible route into the construction industry.
Excellent. I think the UK government has really put in money, and the private sector has put in money to support this program. I don't know if other, especially in the US, there is a similar program, but definitely that provides an excellent pathway into our industry. Now, within this question that we are discussing, there are two additional dimensions I would like to explore. One is digitalization, and the second is demand side pressures, including sustainability and net zero carbon. On the one hand, digitalization, in my view, makes our industry more attractive to the digital natives and probably helps address some of the public image problems that we may have. But on the other side, it also makes it complicated because our existing workforce may not be that digital savvy. So how do you see digitalization as a way to bring more and more people into our sector? Lisa, and then Sarah.
I agree, Anil, actually. I'm not particularly digital savvy, being in the construction industry for the last 20 years. It's kind of like a new thing, and I'm happy to hold my hands up and say that that's not my forte at all. But I'm also happy to hold my hands up and say, yeah, bring the next generation in, get them into the industry, get these people in who are really clever, where this is their skill set. But again, you're never ever going to attract them in unless you get that word out. And it's a lot like what Alistair said, we need to shout about the industry and all the positives that we have and get that word out to get that young skill set in that can support all of us.
Yeah, but I think to some extent we've already seen success in our lifetime. We've seen a new pathway open up to enter the industry. There was a time several years ago when you couldn't even imagine a job posting saying BIM VDC manager or a construction modeler. As I was coming out of the university, no such thing was heard of. I don't want to date myself, but still, I think we're seeing these channels open up to attract more and more folks. Sarah, are you seeing within cost management, project management practice, digital becoming a small hook to attract a younger generation into our sector?
Absolutely. And, I think whenever these young professionals are interviewing, they're very much interviewing the company as well as we are them. So being able to speak on that data piece and what we're doing that really excites them is going to be key. Regarding our graduate development program, we recently added a data and technology competency just so we can get these young professionals in the mix with everything, and then in turn start to grow our own capability on the data and technology piece.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Before we move on, I do want to answer and connect some of the questions from our audience, and the main ones that talk about university. I know, Sarah, and you may want to share this with the audience as well, that you're doing with RICS jointly some work with HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. So that part I will pick up in the next question, but what else are you doing with the universities? The question really from Oliver, which is, do you think that the overemphasis on university has contributed to this situation? I think, Alistair, you did mention that opening up a channel through apprenticeships may relieve some of that pressure. Any views, all three of you? We'll start with Alistair, then Lisa and Sarah. Talk about the role universities have to play in addressing this broader shortage challenge and also encouraging more young people to enter our sector, working together with the industry.
So I'll kick things off. I think one thing we do need to be careful about, if I was sitting watching this today as an undergraduate doing my degree and everyone was saying, oh, degrees are a bad thing, that would give me the creeps. I'd be really worried. So I think we need to remind ourselves that university is an important route for developing knowledge for people that will be going into certain roles. However, I think the challenge is it shouldn't be the universal route. So it's about understanding where the university route is going to be appropriate for different learners, where apprenticeships may be, where traineeships, where other pathways may be appropriate, and guiding people through the right things. And it not necessarily that one is sort of siloed off from the other. You may see in a degree apprenticeship where you're doing a degree, but you're doing so as part of an apprenticeship. But ultimately, it does have to come down to what is the knowledge that we're looking to develop, and what's the best foundation for that to be achieved. So I think it's industry working with universities, because the other thing is we need to make sure that if we are encouraging people to go through degrees, which will cost them significantly, that the university is not free, we should make sure that they get the very best degree out at the end of that is most relevant to the job that they are going to do at the end of the day. I think there is a challenge that there's become a bit of a separation between what industry needs and what is being produced at the end of some degree courses for our sector.
Lisa, your views on the role of universities working with the private sector and perhaps governments?
So I totally echo what Alistair says in every respect. I mean, just to shed some more light on this, I'm degree educated and chartered under 2 institutions, and it was the construction industry that paid for my degree. So I did come through an apprenticeship route where 4 days a week in the office and 1 day at university. I never ever wanted to go to university full time, so the construction industry was an ideal place for me. And the fact that I came out of that with zero debt associated with obtaining a degree was thanks to the construction industry. I also agree with Alistair, and I've done some work with Seeker on this, with the universities, where we've sat in with the universities, and I think the biggest role that the university's got to play at the moment is to listen to industry and work with them and give us a course that is suited and designed to our industry. Like we've just touched on, our industry is evolving all of the time, and what we need is somebody to come out of a degree situation. We're going to need a graduate, whether the industry's funded it or whether they've self-funded it, but we need that person to be able to deliver what we need them to deliver. Therefore, they need to have a really good understanding of our current industry. So that universities, in my opinion, have got a responsibility to make their course content relevant and to skill those people up and educate those people up so that they come into an industry and they have a level of understanding that we can then work with.
Thanks, Lisa. Sarah, I know you talked about working in the ACE program with high schools and others. Do you also work with community colleges and universities?
Yes, definitely. I think university relations is a huge part of this, especially if you can get into any sort of guest lecture opportunities, just getting in front of these students and giving them, real life examples of what the construction industry looks like. As far as community colleges, it's less so on our end. I think those are more for your skilled trade professionals, which is also a great career path to choose. Just not so much our bread and butter, but definitely doing those university relations is going to be key, not only to attract the young professionals, but just to expand their knowledge on what's really out there. I think sometimes just classroom work can be it can cover a little bit of what's actually going on, but getting in front of the students is going to show them what it really does look like.
Thank you. There's one question which I actually would call a comment. Therefore, I'm going to read it because mostly we have addressed it, but it's very appropriate to read that comment. So it's from John Clark, MRICS. Quite a lot of young construction professionals are doing degrees. Would more apprentices actually be far more useful? Hands on the job, but make salaries more attractive, and part-time day education was useful for me. Thanks for sharing that. I think we all agree that that's a very good approach, another pathway to enter into our sector. So moving along to our next question, which Sarah, I'd request you to begin discussing, is connected to what I had previously commented, HBCUs. How can diversity in construction be increased? We all know the problem. We've all been talking about the problem. What steps as an organization you are taking, and what do you suggest our sector take to address this challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that diversity can be increased by taking a chance on people who don't have the typical background and support them with the framework. I mentioned our graduate development program previously. In previous years, we've had about 10 to 15 graduates per class, and this year we ramped that up to about 30. And we were able to do that by looking outside of the normal degrees. Typically, we just went after construction management, construction science, engineering degrees like that, and opened it up quite a bit. And doing that, we were able to definitely diversify this graduate pool, not only from a female perspective, but also from different nationalities and backgrounds. Also partnering with programs like ACE, where the majority of their students are minority and female, because they prioritize engaging students in communities that are traditionally underrepresented in the industry. So being able to use those tools that are available to you. I will say, though, I have noticed in the construction management degrees that they are the most diverse they've been. So that's definitely a good sign. Hopefully we'll start seeing that effects in our hiring. But yes, partnering with HBCUs is huge. Getting in front of these students who may not have a lot of exposure to construction and the industry, and let them know that there is a great career path, and here are the steps you need to take to make that career path happen.
Thanks, Sarah. Lisa, what kind of steps are you seeing, and what steps your organization is taking to make inroads into this issue and increase diversity? How far is there still to go?
I think there's still a long way to go, but I do see a lot of change. So now on site, I see a lot of EDI managers. So in Strabag, we have EDI representatives and EDI managers, and that's their job, is to try and look at that situation and try to resolve the issues around that. We're also involved in quite a lot of initiatives to try and get more diversity in the industry and help plug the skills gaps. So I know Strabag on their SCS joint venture Silver Partners even with women in construction. So that allows them to access a talent pool and to bring them into the industry. There's lots of other people doing initiatives out there to do with, like ex-offenders and veterans, recruitment through that. I'm seeing some other things pop up. So I have a friend who's in construction who heads up like Muslim in Rail, so that opens up a different diversity group to just get the word out that that it's acceptable no matter who you are or what you are to be in the industry, and that's certainly the word that we need to get out. And we also need to look at when we get those people into the industry that we then retain them. That's a big issue that we face. We must then learn to retain them. So we do get a lot of women in the industry, and then our retention of them isn't so great. So we need to really look at that. But shouting about, the fact that you can do it. I'm always one to say that, mum of 2 children, and I work in the construction industry. I've worked internationally and took my children with me, and that's never been an issue. And I've always been well supported in doing that. So the industry just needs to get better at supporting people when they come into the industry, I think.
Thanks, Lisa. Alistair, as an association and perhaps other professional bodies, what role can we play in addressing this issue?
Well, I think I'll start with the fact that I think, sadly, the industry's record on this is pretty appalling. I would like to say it's better than it is, and I do agree with our previous panelists that things are moving forward, we are developing, but the numbers are pretty bad out there in terms of across most sort of metrics of diversity for the construction industry. And yet, as an industry, we know that diverse teams work more effectively than those that are sort of monoculture. So this should be in all our interest. There is a business case for diversity. So I think from a trade association point of view or an industry body point of view, it's time to start taking this really seriously. Our organisation has for a number of years run a Fairness, Inclusion and Respect programme for the UK construction industry, and we've trained maybe 5, 6, 7,000 people in EDI awareness and how to sort of be ambassadors within their own organizations. And that sounds great, but it's really, you know, an industry that employs 2 million people in the UK. It's nowhere near enough. So I think the good news in this is there does seem to be an appetite across the whole of the construction industry. I mentioned earlier involvement in the Construction Leadership Council that represents the whole UK construction industry. There seems to be an appetite to have a sort of a single consolidated plan for how we can move the dial here, because I don't know, last 10 years, I feel the dial is moving, but it's not moving very far, very fast.
Thank you. The one last thing that I wanted to check each one of you help me understand. Do we have data to make the right decisions about DEI or EDI? Some places I've heard that we don't even capture much data to help us move in the right direction. Is that true, or do you think more needs to be done on gathering this kind of information and data?
So I'm happy to kick off on that because in the last week, we've, through that Leadership Council, we've just confirmed that we've basically put together a standard set of metrics for the UK construction industry around EDI data for precisely the point that you mentioned, Anil. There's not enough good quality data around what within individual businesses and at an industry level we're seeing in terms of the numbers of people, and not just the numbers but how they're treated. The point that was raised earlier about do they arrive and then immediately leave the industry because it's such an uncomfortable place to work. So we're trying to get a standard data set so people can benchmark themselves against their cohort to see where they are, because that hopefully shows who's leading the pack that we can learn from, but also those towards the back can say, well, you know, we need to do better in this regard.
Lisa, any point you want to make on data, and then Sarah?
I don't think we capture enough data at all and understand our statistics of where we are at all. I think another thing that we need to do is when people come in as well, we need to give them opportunity and a voice. You know, when these people come in, that's part of their retention, to give them that as well.
Okay, Sarah?
Yeah, we're definitely tracking from a diversity perspective and trying to set targets on how to increase those numbers. But I think that's very much true, is being able to, once we get these staff onboarded, make sure they're feeling you know, a part of the company, make sure they are being recognized and invest in their overall career with us. And especially if someone raises their hand for that next opportunity, we're acknowledging that and we're helping them stay within, you know, within the business.
Thank you. I'm going to move to our next question. And this is also a word that we have been using for a long time, training. And I have some experience working with folks about training. I've worked with lots of home builders in the US, and they were products or construction means and methods that were clearly superior compared to what was being practiced. But we couldn't adopt those newer innovative methods because of this issue of who will train, because when multi-trades or disciplines are involved, if you disrupt one discipline, who's going to train the folks in that discipline to learn the new tool, the new technique, the new means, or the new method? So training also has been quite a bit of a challenge for our sector. So the question to you, Alastair, is as construction modernizes, is the training of new skills keeping up with the demand?
So Anil, I think in relation to this question, I'd break it down into two elements. There's the what are we training people in, and how are we delivering that training? I'll answer the second of those first. In terms of the how, this is going to sound terrible, but probably the best thing that's ever happened for construction training was the arrival of COVID-19, because it forced organizations across the industry to look again at how they delivered their training, because physically they couldn't put people in classrooms to deliver training. So we've seen much more blended learning, great deal more use of e-learning, great use of webinars, seminars, online learning. So it feels like that's opened the door. My own organization probably trebled the amount of training we delivered in the heart of a pandemic because we just did things differently. I think in terms of the what, that's a lot more challenging, because we are seeing very rapidly emerging demands for new skills, whether that's in the digital space, things that you would never even have considered in construction, coding and things like that. What do the standards even look like, and who's responsible for developing them before we even think about delivering them? I think in the UK we're fortunate insofar as we do have an industry training board that it's funded to look at these issues in the round. But even then, it takes time to evolve the training provision, and then you do bump up against the challenge of having people to deliver the training, and that challenge is double, because A, you've got to find the people who have the knowledge, and B, the people that have got that knowledge are probably earning far more than you can afford to pay someone who's going to do training. So there's a sort of a market failure there in terms of having capacity to deliver training and what you might call future skills for construction. I think as an industry, we're trying to address this in the UK by having this collaborative skills plan for the industry. So recognizing we're short on resource, we're trying to put all of our resource in the best places. We've got a dedicated working group looking at some of these issues, and then going back to the how we deliver it, we've also got something called the Supply Chain School, which provides almost a one-stop shop of free training on particularly sustainability, but increasingly also growing into things like on-site. So some of these new skills, rather than thousands of companies all going off and developing their own internal training courses, we're collaborating as one. So there's one place to get that information, and because it's done once, it's done well once. So this is experts putting together the training courses that are then available free to air to industry. So I think that is the way forward. But I do think, yeah, the rapid demand to change the way that we deliver construction is going to put pressure on our skills infrastructure in the UK.
Thank you for getting us started on this topic. I'm going to weave in a question from our participants. Geraldine has a question. To what extent do employment practices mean that people leave the industry once trained? I can maybe sort of rephrase this, leave the company once trained. Lisa and then Sarah, your views on that.
That's huge. I think the environment that we work in is huge. I've already touched on the fact that, you know, our retention of women in the industry is really low. So then you get them in, and then you've got an issue with retaining them. This will be across the board with a lot of people. You know, you'll get people in, you'll train them, and then if they don't like the environment that they're in, or they just can't handle it, there's a lot of construction sites are quite different across the board. Some of them can be, you know, at times fairly brutal for some people, and they don't like it and they will leave, and that coincides with the package of benefits that the employee gives them, and whether that's in keeping with what they need.
Sarah?
Yeah, this is a huge one. You know, it's unfortunate that you take the time to get someone trained, get them up to speed, but then in turn they become you know, in demand from other companies. You know, and especially with this candidate-driven market, people are leaving for a few dollars more. I think it's really key, if you're finding staff leaving, to conduct those exit interviews and understand why they're leaving, what you could have possibly done differently to help them stay, and then what you can do moving forward to make sure that doesn't keep happening, you know, with other staff.
Okay, thank you. On that issue, Alistair, your views on partnerships between universities, industry or the private sector, and governments to address the training issue. I think UK does present an exemplar in terms of having a central or a national discussion on the training issue. So if you could share your experiences and views on that, working in partnership.
Well, I think it is true that some of the work that the UK is doing is exemplary, but it's probably because we started from such a bad place that the only way we could solve the problem was by getting people together and trying to make sense of it all. I've talked a couple of times about the Construction Leadership Council, and it has allowed us to bring together representatives from the providers, not just universities, but further education colleges, even schools, to talk about how are we going to meet these future skills needs. What are the important activities. What do we need to change? And another example of that would be we recognise that for those that are wanting to join our industry, it was confusing what they needed to do as their first step. So we've created a single portal for anyone looking to find their first job in the industry, or even their first apprenticeship or their first work experience. So that gives them one place to go. And that only happened because we had a sort of a multi-party collaboration between the UK government, trade associations like my own, and those providers, whether they be colleges or universities. So I think, yeah, there are things that we can be proud of, but they were almost a necessity, driven by the fact that we were getting things so wrong historically.
Okay. The question on this for Lisa. Lisa, growing up as a civil engineer, I hardly recall people discussing carbon, social issues, social outcomes, and other broader demand side drivers. But now it's becoming very clear that our clients, our end users are going to demand net zero carbon, maybe modern methods of construction, maybe digital ways of working, and so on. So these pressures then need to somehow reflect on our training programs, and just perhaps focusing on existing workforce. How can we address catching up these kinds of skills with our existing workforce to deliver those outcomes?
Yeah, I think this is where you're going to see new opportunity opening up in the industry, because you're going to need carbon experts. You know, you need experts coming in telling you how to incorporate it into your project, to educate the existing team on the mechanisms of it, the importance of it, how it works, the gains. It's certainly a new area, and we certainly need some people coming in with that level of expertise.
Thank you. So I'm going to read off a very interesting comment by Lee. Early engagement is essential to improve uptake of built environment careers at our level. This also makes an inclusive approach more natural. We ran a UR hired exercise for year 10 students, which attracted an amazingly diverse group. I think that's an excellent point. Perhaps, Lee, you could share your experiences with us, and we can then probably share across the board as a sector. There are several other questions. I'm going to try and pick up ones that we can address quickly. As I scroll through these, a question from Graham: should there be not be more grassroots interventions to encourage skills development at schools level? For example, have more faculties like steelwork, carpentry, electrical, plumbing. This could encourage more young people into the construction industry, where they could further their careers in professional fields. This could be a long-term solution. Any views from our panelists on that comment?
I'm happy to have a go. I mean, ultimately, I think combining two of those points, the idea of, while people are still at school, giving them an understanding of what our industry looks like just feels essential, you know, and I don't think you can start too early. I've got a 10-year-old and a 14-year-old. The 14-year-old already has a very strong idea of what he wants to do. The 10-year-old has a pretty good idea of what he wants to do. So if we're leaving it till 16, you know, we've missed the boat as an industry. And so it feels like if we can be getting into schools in a way that doesn't feel like it's sort of telling them, but is actually almost part of the curriculum that they're learning, we're supporting the teachers with the curriculum in ways that expose them and show them the way that our industry operates. That feels like a positive way. I also have a thing about, for many people, for parents, what happens to their kids before and after school is a challenge, because they often work long hours. And so if there's some sort of wraparound care that gives people an opportunity to experience the construction industry in a controlled environment, so it would be games that look a bit like construction rather than physical construction, it just feels like another thing where you can be warming people up to the idea of a career in our sector.
Thank you so much. I think given the time remaining, I'm going to convert the last question we have into more of a rapid fire closing statement. We'll begin, Sarah, 30 seconds, your closing on this topic.
Yeah, I think a lot of this was already hit on, but I mean, I think it's investing in your people, providing training. Just because you're experienced doesn't mean that you are the best for that opportunity. So kind of being more open to who you're hiring and what that background looks like. And then, of course, just investing in your people and making sure they stay within your organization and provide them the opportunity to grow within their career.
Lisa?
Yeah, I think where we go into schools is like Alistair says, is a really good thing. The issue for me is we need to do it earlier. We need to do it at primary school stage, and there needs to be some funding around that. I think somehow we need to educate teachers. We need to make it part of the curriculum. They need to help us get the message out. We need to educate parents, and there needs to be some funding released to enable us to do that.
Thank you. Alistair, in less than 30 seconds.
I'm going to be very brief. I think the key point here is not to look around and work out who else is responsible for delivering this agenda. It's everyone on this call's responsibility to go out and promote our industry, sell what we do, and remind people of the great career that you can have in construction. If we do that, I think the future generations of construction are probably within our grasp.
Thank you very much. I think we are very near the end, so I'm going to move on to our closing slide to thank our panel. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you sharing your time, your expertise, and putting in the effort to get us ready for this panel. I personally felt we had a very good discussion, so I'd like to thank you. A reminder to all those who participated today that we will be publishing a recording and a written summary of this webinar, as well as the presentation online, and do feel free to share those with other professional networks. Moving on to our next slide. These are some of our upcoming webinars that you may be interested in. Lots of interesting cross-sectoral topics being picked up. Please do take a moment to fill up and complete the online poll, which will appear on your screens as we end this webinar. Please do join us in any of these future webinars. You can also see us on any social media or Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. You can receive news of our upcoming webinars and very interesting thought leadership pieces and articles that get published. Lastly, we have a WBEF app that you can download to stay current, stay and receive information using this app. With that, I'm going to close the session today. Thank you for all joining. Until next time, goodbye.